The early beginnings of St. Peter's Church goes back to the year 1874, when a group of German settlers in Center Township decided to establish a congregation. A log church was erected near Oak Ridge Cemetery on Darmstadt Road, which served as their first house of worship. 10 years later, in 1884, our present sanctuary was built on a plot of ground donated by Mr. Henry Hopple, grandfather of member John Hopple. The first pastor to service was Reverend Otto Gubler. Under his leadership, the congregation was organized in 1884 under the name of St. Peter's German Evangelical Church of Center Township. In the early years, St. Peter's shared pastoral leadership with Salem-Darmstadt, St. Paul's German Township, and Bethlehem, and held services once a month. In 1927, the small but active Ladies' Aid contributed their time and effort to augment the meager income of the congregation through bake sales, socials, and suppers. Through their concerted effort, we were able to build a small but sufficient annex to the original school hall. With the passing of years and the gradual loss of members, the problem of maintaining the church under the monthly service plan became almost impractical. On Mother's Day, 1950, the first morning worship service took place. A new outside bulletin board was built by the men of St. Peter's to tell the community that the little white church by the side of the road had at last come out of hiding. In September of 1951, St. Peter's extended an official call to Reverend Manfred Haas, and he was unanimously elected. A full-time program with Sunday school and church services was immediately introduced. Also in 1951, the excavation of the basement was started. For months, the men of the congregation with friends and neighbors toiled until midnight to get the job done.
And I was very young. I played on the dirt pile outside. How they got it started, I'm not sure. But after they got it dug out enough, then they went down with a tractor and a slip scraper and dug the dirt out. That's about all I remember about the basement.
Over the next several years, the church attracted new members and expanded its ministry.
Yes, I went to Sunday school and had lots of good teachers. We used to have Halloween parties. We had all kinds of little parties. I can remember one where some of us dressed up as country singers and sat on bales of hay and sang.
Well, my earliest memories is Sunday school. I remember Hazel Martin being my Sunday school teacher, and the youth group. The youth group was very active when I was here. We did all kinds of things. We had dances in the basement, we had fundraisers, we did all kinds of things. We were always up here.
Because we really got in trouble on that when we filled the basement with about 6 inches of leaves.
John Adela Stock and Norman and I were in charge of decorating. And there were about 2 feet of leaves outside because we used to have trees along this sidewalk area here. And we thought it would be neat just to put the leaves down in the basement and add a little bit more autumn to the situation. It was a beautiful, we had it decorated beautifully and it was fun. But when the adults found out about it, they said you could have started a fire. So they didn't like that too much, but we got every leaf back out of it afterwards.
As the church grew, limitations with the building became apparent.
I can remember they had wood stoves.
Oh, yeah?
2 of them on either side of the church, and they didn't have no center aisle. They had an aisle on either side.
So in the early 60s, a complete remodel of the sanctuary was completed with an enlarged sanctuary and new stained glass windows. But by the early 70s, as Reverend Haas neared retirement, the church recognized changes needed to be made to attract a new pastor.
I think the biggest challenge that I was involved in was back when we was making the change from Reverend Haas to a new minister. We didn't even have the money to afford the surveys and things like that. to see what procedures we had to take to get the job done.
We went through the search committee and did make a call to Reverend Mark Stallhut, who was a new graduate of Eden Seminary in St. Louis, and we had to buy a parsonage.
He accepted the job at St. Peter's, and we didn't have the money to move him, so one of the friends of the church owned a moving company.
Several of the members went over to St. Louis and helped them load the truck, and that way we saved money on moving the pastor and his family from St. Louis to Evansville.
And that was when we was right on the verge of becoming a mission church at the time, because the financial situation was really very tight.
During this time, St. Peter's also began its long history of involvement in church league activities, including bowling, softball, and volleyball.
Well, at one time we had a St. Peter's Bowling League. It started out at Diamond Lanes, then we moved down here to North Park to Meadow Lanes.
Having started with St. Peter's back in the day, it was through, there was a bowling league that St. Peter's had, and we bowled every other Saturday, and it was a lot of fun, great fellowship and so forth. And
we also had at one time a volleyball team that played in the UCC league they had set up. It was co-ed. We had a men's softball team, we had a women's softball team, and we had a co-ed softball team at different times representing St. Peter's.
And I understand you were maybe the coach of that women's softball team?
Yeah, I got railroaded into that.
And of course, fellowship opportunities at the church continued as well.
There's a particular picture I ran across, Joe, where you were dressed as a lady with a nice wig, but you had a mustache. What was that all about? Do you remember?
That was one of them high-class talent shows they had going up there that we were involved in.
Did we have a lot of talent in the church?
It was stretched.
Finances remained tight, and the congregation faced the important decision of whether to become a mission church, receiving financial support from the conference.
We decided as a church that we were ready to take on a full-time pastor at that time, and we decided that to go ahead and make that move. And then the decision was made. I went on the board that year, and we went from about a $4,000 budget to a $20,000 budget. And after 5 years, we stood on our own, and we didn't need their support anymore. So we became a full-fledged non-mission church with a full-fledged pastor, and we're very proud of ourselves, and we should have been, because we came a long way, and look at where we've come today.
In 1978, St. Peter's called Reverend Linda Frischi-Morey to be our pastor, making her the first female pastor in the Indiana-Kentucky Conference.
So in 1978, JC and I moved from the west side of Evansville to the north side. And we had been active members at St. Peter's Wadesville, but we knew when we made the move we would seek another church home. We knew Pastor Linda Frischi-Morey from St. Peter's Wadesville. So one Sunday in July, Ryan and I came to visit St. Peter's. We sat in the back pew. He had just turned 4. It was summer. The attendance was light. There was no air conditioning. The sanctuary needed painting. The carpet was worn, and the exterior needed work. But what was so evident that morning was this strong sense of community amongst the people that were present. Because of where I sat, people had to get up and come to me to welcome me, and they did that. They were engaged with Ryan. They told me about Pastor Linda and how much they loved having her here. And it was obvious to me that they cared about their pastor, and they also wanted new people to visit and come back. And that day I was hooked. I knew this was where the Whitmores needed to be.
To help offset some of the expenses and keep the church moving ahead, there have been two long-standing fundraisers: Burgo, that dates back to the early 50s, and the Fall Festival, which started in 1983.
But the first Burgo I saw up there was when Judy and I was going together. They had the kettles lined up along the tree line, along the west edge of the parking lot, farmed with wood. The guys were standing out there stirring it late on a Friday night.
I remember the days of cooking Burgo in the back part of the church, back then we were stirring every kettle. We didn't have automatic stirrers.
Well, there was a shed on the back where the kitchen is now was basically a lean-to with a screened-in area.
They used to have enough people going up there helping that you could sit in the kitchen and play clabber. The losers got up and went out and stirred, and the winners sat and played. And they had enough people involved in it that they'd keep a card game going all night. If you played good clabber, you didn't have to stir.
That was just so much fun with that fellowship with the other men and so forth. But one of the memories I have of that is that because of the intense heat of coming off of the kettles of the Burgo, the condensation would build up inside, and it would actually drip like rain. It would almost be like raining inside the Burgo kitchen.
And they built another kitchen for Burgo only. And there's 5 kettle sits in there permanently. And somewhere along the line, I got stuck doing that. And I ain't sure when that happened.
And you've been doing a fine job ever since then.
And I think, this is 2014 and 2015, somebody else is going to be heading it up, and I'll just help them.
You're going to be consulting.
I'll be a consultant, a freebie.
We started selling our Kukens on Franklin Street in 1983, and we sold from a card table because we could not get a booth. The following year we did get a small booth, and it had a little steeple on the top of it, so that's how we were known for our Kukens, with our little steeple. I can remember specifically Aunt Emma Butch, Ruth Crawford, standing at a small kitchen table in our old fellowship hall, or in our old kitchen, and mixing the dough by their hands, with their hands in a dish pan, and that's how we got started. And they were so adamant about not letting anybody help them. They just wanted to do it all themselves. We got to pat the Kukens in the pans and get them all ready, but they had to mix them. In 1983, we sold our Kukens for $2.50, and we had a profit of $3,000. I think we made around 1,500 Kukens. This year we sold 2,712, and our profit was $13,110.
In the late 80s and early 90s, St. Peter's was served by interims Phil Hoy and John Iliff, as well as lay minister Chuck Herbert. Then in the mid-90s, St. Peter's called our second female pastor, Reverend Elizabeth Bear. During her time, several building projects were completed.
In the mid-90s, we realized that we needed more space for our activities, and we also realized that part of the church buildings were getting in bad condition. We needed to upgrade our restrooms, our kitchen facilities, our fellowship hall area was too small, and so forth. So at that point in time, we went through a couple of false starts of getting changes made. But finally, in the late 90s, there was a committee formed, and the congregation got behind the committee, and the new facilities that we have here now, the new fellowship hall, Sunday school rooms, pastor's office, new restrooms, kitchen, and all that was done.
During this time, our mission and outreach efforts also expanded.
The mission work initially was mainly helping like the Ozanam Family Shelter and some other things in the community. And in more recent years, we have tried to expand on that.
We give to the Tri-State Food Bank, and we're still discussing what they're called, Evansville Council of Churches, Habitat, and
Evansville Tri-State Association.
And then the fruit plates we make for the shut-ins or elderly, either a member of the church or a friend of the family or whatever.
And St. Peter's officially joined several other UCC and Disciples of Christ churches in around 2001-2002 to form a group to build one Habitat house in Evansville every year. And we've skipped a couple of years in there, but I believe we've built around 11 or 12 homes with this group of UCC and Disciples of Christ churches.
Well, we always support Habitat. It's kind of a standing joke that after the sausage supper, JC's always at the meeting to make sure that we have our Habitat, but we're always happy to do that.
To add to that, we've also in the last year started a SAWS group, which stands for Servants at Work, and we build wheelchair ramps for handicapped people that cannot afford to build them on their own.
The other thing that we've done for the last for many years is we support OCWM, and there are dollars that come from that contribution that go to international mission as well as Neighbors in Need, and that money is kept within the United States. So our mission focus is real here.
From 2006 to 2009, Reverend John Trinka served St. Peter's as an interim. In August 2009, the call was made to Reverend Brian Bushkill to serve as our next full-time pastor. Under his leadership, the congregation worked together to discern a new vision for the future of the church.
All of these things tie together. We talk about growing spiritually, serving faithfully, and sharing joyfully. Those are also intertwined in everything we do. I cannot separate them into separate entities. It's all together kind of one thing in any activity that we do. So regardless of what we do as an individual, to whether it's a mission trip with the youth, or if we're participating in Habitat or SAWS, or if it's a bake sale that for the Women's Guild, all of those things, we all have the opportunity to serve and do what we can enjoy doing, at the same time helping others and growing in those three ways.
And I hope to see our vision continue. I think the changes we've made in the church in the last year and a half or 2 years are amazing. And one of the reasons I love this church is because I come from a conservative UCC church, and this little church is conservative, but it seems to be very open to change. And I love that about it, and I'd like to see that continue.
Over the last 2 years, significant upgrades to the church's technology were completed.
It was a pretty ambitious project, but we did it, and we were able to do it with the matching grant. We got a grant for 50% of the money if we could come up with the other 50%. And it was quite a stretch for us, but it was very successful in the end. The congregation was very supportive of it. And at first, I wasn't sure how that was going to add to our worship service, but I think it adds a lot to our worship service. It helps me to better understand when he has pictures or maps or whatever that's shown up there. It helps me to better understand the service, and I get more out of it. And I think that probably everyone else does too as well. So I think it was a very good thing to do for St. Peter's. It's part of keeping up with the times and providing facilities that allow good worship services and good activities in the church.
After having been on the board the last 3 years and watched us go through the tech grant and see all what we have done just in the last 3.5 years. It's just been amazing to me.
As a congregation, we look forward to the future with hope.
My hope for St. Peter's in the next 10 years is to still have Pastor Brian and to have the church full every Sunday.
I would like to see it continue to grow, and I would like to see we get to the point that, and I know this is a dream of many of us in the congregation, that our Sunday offering is enough to pay the bills for the church, and things like the Burgo and Cookins could be used for capital improvements and outreach to add to the extra life.
I just know we all like family, and we all work together, and that's what it takes to make a church.
I hope that St. Peter's continues to grow and to thrive and to witness and serve to the surrounding community as well as to the members of the congregation. And I know that we can do that. You know, we have good momentum here, and we have people that are willing to serve and witness and work hard. And I'm confident that St. Peter's will continue to go forward in the future.
Happy anniversary, St. Peter's. Happy anniversary, St. Peter's Church. We love you.
Look right here. Now look right here.
Happy anniversary, St. Peter's.
St. Peter's. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, Julie. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, St. Peter's.
Happy anniversary, St. Peter's.
St. Peter's United Church of Christ, growing spiritually, serving faithfully, and sharing joyfully.